Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I was 16 and working at the country's best yogurt, this frozen yogurt place in our local strip mall. It wasn't my dream job or anything, but it paid minimum wage and gave me some spending money for gas and movies with friends. I've been there about 4 months, mostly working evenings and weekends around my high school schedule. The job was pretty straightforward. I scooped frozen yogurt, cleaned tables, restocked toppings, and did whatever else needed doing. The store had two freezers, a big display freezer in the front, where we kept all the decorated ice cream cakes for customers to see, and a larger walk-in freezer in the back for storage and extra inventory. My manager was this woman in her 30s who seemed nice enough at first. She had this habit of giving instructions and then disappearing, leaving us teenage employees to figure things out on our own. That Tuesday started normal enough. I came in at 3 after school, put on my uniform, and started my usual routine. The afternoon was slow, just a few customers here and there getting their yogurt fix. Around 6, my manager called me over to the front counter. She told me she needed me to do something before I left that night. She explained that the front display freezer was acting up again and wasn't keeping things cold enough. She wanted me to take all the display cakes out of the front freezer and move them to the back freezer. She emphasized that I needed to move all of them and not leave any behind. I looked at the front freezer. There had to be at least 15 custom decorated cakes in there, birthday cakes, anniversary cakes, graduation cakes. Some of them looked pretty expensive with fancy decorations and writing. I asked her if she was sure about moving all of them. She said yes, she wanted all of them moved. She said the freezer wasn't working right and she didn't want the cakes to get ruined. She told me to just move them to the back and they would figure out what to do the next day. I asked if I should put up a sign or something letting customers know where the display cakes went. She told me not to worry about it and just to move the cakes and lock up when I was done. Then she said she was heading out for the day, grabbed her purse, and left. I stood there for a minute, then started the process of carefully moving each cake from the front display to the back freezer. It took me almost an hour because I had to be super careful not to damage any of the decorations. Some of these cakes probably cost $50 or $60. After I finished moving all the cakes, I cleaned up the front area, did the usual closing routine, and locked up. The whole time I kept thinking it was weird to move all the display cakes. But she was the manager and I was just a part-time high schooler, so what did I know? The next day I wasn't working, but I got a call around noon from my manager. She asked if I had moved those cakes like she requested. I told her that yes, all of them were in the back freezer like she had told me. She said good and mentioned that the repair guy was coming that afternoon to look at the front freezer. Everything seemed fine. I worked my next shift 2 days later and everything was back to normal. The front freezer was working and had new display cakes in it. I figured the problem was solved and forgot about the whole thing. Then the following week happened. I was working a Thursday evening shift, just me and one other employee. Around 7, the store owner walked in. This guy rarely showed up during evening shifts, so I knew something was up. He was this middle-aged man who always wore expensive suits and acted like he was running a Fortune 500 company instead of a frozen yogurt shop. He walked straight to the front counter and started looking around with this angry expression on his face. He asked where all the display cakes were. I looked at the front freezer. It was pretty empty compared to usual, maybe only 3 or 4 cakes instead of the normal 15. I told him I wasn't sure since I had just gotten there an hour ago. He said this was unacceptable and that they needed those display cakes to show customers what they could make. He asked how they were supposed to sell custom cakes if customers couldn't see examples. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. First, he called my manager, then he called the assistant manager, then he started pacing around getting more and more worked up. He complained that nobody was answering their phones and said this was ridiculous. Then he turned to me with this accusatory look and asked if I had moved cakes out of the front freezer recently. I told him that yes, about a week ago my manager had told me to move them all to the back freezer because the front one wasn't working. He said that was impossible because they had just had that freezer fixed and it was working perfectly fine. I said I didn't know about that, but my manager had told me it wasn't keeping things cold enough and to move all the cakes to the back. He demanded that I show him these cakes in the back freezer right away. We walked to the back freezer and I opened it up. There were no cakes, just the usual inventory of yogurt containers and supplies. I told him they weren't there. He asked what I meant they weren't there and where they were. I explained that I didn't know that I had moved them back there like my manager told me to, but that was over a week ago. The store owner started getting really angry. He started raising his voice and asked if I had any idea how much those cakes were worth. He said some of those were custom orders the customers had already paid for. I told him I had just done what my manager told me to do. He said that my manager was claiming she never told anyone to move any cakes and that she said the freezer had been working fine for weeks. I felt this sinking feeling in my stomach. I realized what had happened. My manager had thrown me under the bus. I said that wasn't true and that she had specifically told me to move all the display cakes because the front freezer wasn't working. He said she claimed that never happened and that I must have misunderstood something. I told him I didn't misunderstand anything and that she had given me clear instructions to move all the cakes. This back and forth went on for another 10 minutes. The store owner was getting more and more angry, and I was getting more and more frustrated. Finally, he said he didn't know what happened there, but someone needed to take responsibility. He ordered me to put all the remaining cakes back in the front freezer right away. I asked what if the freezer really wasn't working properly. He said the freezer was fine because he had just had it serviced, and he told me to put the cakes back right now. At this point, I was pretty fed up with the whole situation. I've been accused of lying, my manager had obviously thrown me under the bus, and now I was being yelled at for following instructions. I decided I didn't care anymore. I said fine, whatever. I went to the back freezer, got the few remaining cakes that were still there from recent orders, and put them in the front display freezer. The store owner watched me do it, still complaining about irresponsible employees and missing inventory. He warned me that this better not happen again. I told him sure thing. After he left, I finished my shift and went home. I didn't really think much more about it until I got a call the next morning. My manager told me I needed to come in that day because we needed to talk. I said I didn't work that day, but she said I just needed to come in. When I got there, both my manager and the store owner were waiting for me. On the counter were the melted remains of the cakes I put back in the front freezer the night before. They were completely ruined, just puddles of cream and frosting. The store owner pointed at the mess and said the freezer had broken again overnight and now these cakes were destroyed. I looked at the melted cakes and started laughing a little. The irony was too much. I said so the freezer was broken after all. My manager said this wasn't funny and that these cakes were expensive. I told her maybe she should have listened when I told her what really happened. The store owner said that was it and that I was fired. He told me to clean out my locker and leave. I said fine by me. I grabbed my stuff from the back room and headed for the door. When I was leaving, I turned back to them and suggested they might want to get that freezer looked at again since it seemed like it was still having problems. I walked out and never looked back. A few weeks later, I heard from a friend who still worked there that they'd had to throw away thousands of dollars worth of cakes because the front freezer kept breaking down. They eventually had to replace the whole unit. The funny part is, I got a job at a pizza place the next week that paid better and had way better management. In mid-2022, I got hired for this position with a clear understanding that it would be almost fully remote. During the interview process, both HR and the hiring director made it clear that remote work was not just allowed, but expected. The only exception would be occasional on-site data center support when needed. This was perfect for me since I've always been more productive working from home. For the first several months, I barely had to visit any data centers. Maybe once every few weeks something would come up that required physical presence, but it was rare. The company had 2 data centers that were relatively close to me by car, so when I did need to go, it wasn't a big hassle. Everything was working smoothly, and I was getting my job done efficiently from home. Then October 2023 rolled around and everything changed because of some new client requirements. Daily checks of the intermediate distribution frame and main distribution frame were now mandatory. The company decided to split this responsibility among all the engineering teams, and I got stuck with Mondays. My main co-worker, who's now our team lead, lived over an hour away from the office. The train line to his area had been shut down for maintenance, making his commute even worse. For me, it was about an hour each way using the express train and bus connection. Not ideal, but manageable. During the meeting where they announced this new requirement, my manager made a point that seemed reasonable at the time. He told us we didn't have to stay in the office all day and that this had been approved by the director. He said we could go in, do the checks, and leave whenever we wanted. That sounded fair to me. I figured I'd make the best of it by signing into work while on the train and bus, knock out the checks quickly along with any other tasks that needed doing, and then head home. It seemed like a reasonable compromise for everyone involved. This arrangement worked perfectly for well over a year. I'd hop on the morning train, be productive during my commute, get to the office, handle whatever needed to be done, and head back home. I was still putting in my full hours, just split between travel time and office time. My productivity stayed high and the client requirements were being met. But then, a couple months ago, everything went sideways. My manager decided to change the rules without even having the decency to tell us directly. Instead, my team lead had to break the news during one of our regular meetings. He told us that if any of us went into the office, we now had to stay for the rest of the day. My team lead made it clear he thought the new policy was complete garbage. After over a year of the previous arrangement working perfectly fine, suddenly we had to waste entire days sitting in an office just because we needed to spend 15 minutes checking some equipment. No explanation was given for this sudden policy change. It made zero sense from a productivity standpoint and was clearly just some power-hungry micromanagement nonsense. That's when I realized I could work around this ridiculous rule. If I had to stay in the office for the rest of the day, then I'd just go in later in the day and leave when my work hours ended at 3:30 p.m. Technically following the rule, but not giving them the satisfaction of wasting my entire day. So I adjusted my schedule. Now I leave for the 12:30 p.m. train, which gets me to the office by 2 p.m. after the 90-minute commute. I do the required checks, handle any other tasks that need attention, and then leave right at 3:30 p.m. when my workday officially ends. Same amount of work getting done, same client requirements being met, but I'm not wasting my entire day sitting in an office for no reason. Last week my manager called me while I was on the afternoon train heading to the office. He asked if I had started work late that day. I told him no, that I was just going to the office for the intermediate distribution frame checks like every Monday. There was complete silence on the other end of the line. He knew exactly what I was doing, and he knew I was still technically following his stupid new requirement. He couldn't say anything because I wasn't breaking any rules. When I told my team lead about the conversation later, he burst out laughing. He said it was brilliant and that my manager was probably frustrated that he couldn't find anything wrong with what I was doing. My manager has painted himself into a corner with his own rule. He wanted to force people to waste entire days in the office, but he didn't think through the obvious workaround. Now he is stuck watching me come in at 2 p.m. every Monday, knowing full well that I'm making a mockery of his policy, but unable to do anything about it because I'm following the letter of his law. I've heard he's been complaining to other managers about remote workers not being team players and taking advantage of flexible policies. Meanwhile, I'm still getting all my work done, meeting every deadline, and keeping our clients happy with the required daily checks. This whole situation has backfired on him spectacularly. Instead of getting people to spend full days in the office like he wanted, he's created a system where I'm technically in compliance while making it clear that his rule is pointless. Other people on different teams have started doing similar things, coming in late and leaving early to minimize their office time while still meeting the technical requirements. My team lead thinks the whole thing is hilarious and has started calling my Monday schedule malicious compliance at its finest. Even some of the other managers have made comments about how ridiculous the new policy is, but my manager is too proud to admit he made a mistake and change it back. So now every Monday I take my leisurely 12:30 p.m. train ride, do exactly what needs to be done in the office, and leave at 3:30 p.m. sharp. My manager gets to watch me walk out the door knowing that his attempt to micromanage remote workers has completely backfired. My son just turned 16 last month. He's a good kid, quiet, respectful, focuses on his grades, and plays on the school basketball team. We moved to this neighborhood about 2 years ago after my divorce was finalized. It was a fresh start for both of us, and the community seemed nice enough. There's a neighborhood association that organizes events, and they have this big pool party every summer. My son is pretty shy around girls. He's had a few crushes but never really dated anyone seriously. I've always told him there's no rush. He's got plenty of time for all that. Focus on school, sports, and figuring out who he is first. When we showed up to the pool party last Saturday, I was just expecting a normal afternoon. My son brought his swim trunks, I packed some snacks, and we were looking forward to meeting more neighbors. The pool area was packed with families, kids running around, the usual summer scene. That's when I first noticed her. This woman was standing near the snack table with her daughter, who looked about my son's age. The woman kept staring at us, especially at my son. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she was just trying to place where she'd seen us before. But then she started walking over with her daughter in tow. The woman introduced herself as one of the event coordinators and said it was nice to meet us. I told her we lived over on Oak Street and tried to keep the conversation friendly. She immediately started gushing about how handsome my son was and introduced her daughter, saying they were both 16. Then she made this comment about how she thought they would make such a cute couple together. My son's face turned red. The daughter looked mortified and kept trying to pull her mom away, whispering for her to please stop. But this woman wasn't taking the hint. She suggested that the two kids go get some pool time together, and maybe her daughter could teach my son some swimming techniques. My son declined, explaining that he was there with me and we were just planning to hang out together. That should have been the end of it. A polite decline, no harm done, but this woman's face completely changed. She pushed harder, telling my son not to be shy and bragging about how popular her daughter was at school. She said he would be lucky to spend time with her. I tried to step in, saying I thought the kids were fine doing their own thing, but she wasn't having it. She went on about how her daughter doesn't usually show interest in boys, but had pointed my son out specifically. She said the least he could do was be polite about it. My son looked uncomfortable and kept looking at me for help. He explained again that he really wasn't looking to date anyone right now because he was focused on basketball season. The daughter actually looked relieved when he said this, but her mother's expression got even darker. She couldn't believe he was turning down her daughter. She started listing all of her daughter's accomplishments. Honor roll, beautiful, father's a lawyer. She acted like my son was crazy for not jumping at the chance. I told her that she needed to back off because my son had said no. That's when she really lost it. She started yelling about what kind of boy turns down a girl like her daughter, getting louder so people were starting to stare. The daughter was practically hiding behind her mom at this point, begging her to just leave and saying this was embarrassing. But this woman was on a mission now. She told us we didn't understand that when her daughter wants something, she gets it, and apparently she wanted to spend time with my son. My son apologized again and repeated that he really wasn't interested in dating anyone. That's when things went completely off the rails. She called my son a little brat and demanded to know if he thought he was too good for her daughter. Before I could even react, she took a step forward and literally kicked my son square in the chest. Not a light push, a full-on kick that sent him stumbling backward, right into the pool. The splash was huge. My son went under completely and for a second I couldn't even see him. When he surfaced, he was coughing and looked dazed. I saw red. This psycho just assaulted my child. I grabbed her by the shoulders and tackled her to the ground. She was screaming about how I had no right to touch her, but I wasn't letting go. I got her in a chokehold, not enough to hurt her seriously, but enough to keep her from getting up and potentially going after my son again. She kept yelling that she would have me arrested while I shouted back that she had just kicked my son into a pool and assaulted a minor. People were shouting and trying to pull us apart. Someone was already on the phone with the police. My son had climbed out of the pool and was just standing there dripping wet and shocked. It took 4 people to finally separate us. This woman was still screaming about how disrespectful my son was, how he had insulted her daughter, completely delusional about what had just happened. One of the neighbors who saw everything told her that we all witnessed her kick the boy and asked what was wrong with her. She justified it by saying my son was being rude to her daughter and that no one disrespects her family like that. The daughter was crying now, apologizing to everyone around her. She kept saying she was sorry and that she never wanted any of this. She told us she had been trying to get her mother to leave us alone. When the police arrived, there were at least a dozen witnesses who saw exactly what happened. This woman actually tried to tell the officers that my son had been harassing her daughter and that she was just defending her child. The officer explained that multiple people saw her kick a minor into the pool without any provocation, and that constituted assault. She argued that it wasn't assault because she barely touched him, and besides, boys his age should know how to swim anyway. Even the cops looked incredulous at her reasoning. My son gave his statement, clearly still shaken up. The daughter confirmed that her mother had been pushing the interaction and that my son had been nothing but polite the entire time. They arrested her right there at the pool party, handcuffs and everything, while half the neighborhood watched. She was still shouting about how this was all a misunderstanding when they put her in the back of the police car. The daughter apologized to us again before leaving with what I assume was her father, who showed up looking completely mortified by the whole situation. 3 weeks later, we got word that she pled guilty to assault of a minor. The neighborhood association voted to remove her from all volunteer positions. We still go to the community pool, but it's a lot more peaceful these days. I live in a small apartment about 20 minutes from the office, and I drive this old Honda that's reliable but nothing fancy. About 4 months ago, I met this girl from the sales department during our lunch break. She seemed nice enough, always friendly when we passed in the hallways, and we started chatting more often. It turns out she lived just a few blocks away from me, which was pretty cool since I didn't know many people in the area yet. One day she mentioned that her car was in the shop and asked if I could give her a ride to work. No big deal, right? We worked at the same place, started at the same time, and lived close by. It made perfect sense, and honestly, I was happy to help out a friend. She offered to pay for gas, which I thought was considerate. When her car got fixed, she asked if we could keep carpooling. She said it was nice having company during the drive, and it would save both of us money on gas. I figured why not. The drive was only 20 minutes, and having someone to talk to in the morning wasn't bad. For the first couple of months, everything worked out great. She'd be ready when I texted her that I was leaving my place, and we'd get to work with time to spare. We'd chat about work stuff, weekend plans, or just random things. It felt like a normal friendship, but then things started changing. About a month ago, I noticed she wasn't always ready when I got to her place. The first few times I didn't think much of it. Maybe she overslept or had to deal with something urgent. I'd sit in my car for maybe 5 minutes while she finished getting ready. Then 5 minutes turned into 10. 10 turned into 15. I'd text her when I left my house like always, giving her the same 20-minute heads up, but she'd still come running out looking frazzled, hair half done, still putting on her jacket. I would send her my usual message telling her I was heading out and would see her in 20 minutes. She'd respond saying she was almost ready, but when I get there, she'd text me from inside saying she just needed 2 more minutes. Those 2 minutes would stretch on and on. I sit there checking my phone, watching the clock, knowing we were cutting it close to get to work on time. Then she started asking for detours. One morning, after keeping me waiting for 12 minutes, she hopped in the car and asked if we could swing by this coffee shop that was completely out of our way. I told her that would add 10 extra minutes to our drive, and we were already running behind. She pleaded with me, saying it would be quick and she'd run in and out. She promised it wouldn't take long. I should have said no, but I didn't want to seem mean. So I drove to the coffee shop, waited while she took her sweet time, ordering some complicated drink, and then we ended up being 5 minutes late to work. My supervisor pulled me aside later that day. He noticed I was late that morning and asked if everything was okay. I apologized and said I got held up, promising it wouldn't happen again. He told me to make sure it didn't, reminding me that we'd talked about punctuality before and he'd hate to have to write me up. I felt terrible. I'd always been reliable, and now I was getting in trouble because I was trying to be nice to a friend. But it kept happening. She'd ask me to drop her off at the employee entrance on the far side of the building instead of the main one where I usually parked. She'd want to stop for breakfast sandwiches or ask if we could pick up her dry cleaning on the way. Every single request added time to our morning, and every single time we'd end up rushing to clock in. The worst part was how she acted like none of this was a big deal. When I mentioned that we were cutting it close, she'd just shrug and say we'd make it, or that a few minutes wouldn't kill anyone. When we both got written up for being late the second time, I knew I had to say something. My job was important to me, and I couldn't afford to keep getting in trouble because of someone else's poor time management. I waited until we were in the car one morning when she'd kept me waiting for 15 minutes and then asked if we could stop for coffee again. I told her I needed to talk about something and that this arrangement wasn't working out. She asked what I meant. I explained that I couldn't keep giving her rides if she wasn't going to be ready on time, and that we'd both gotten written up twice now and I couldn't afford to lose my job. She said it wasn't that bad and we'd only been a little late. I reminded her that a little late was still late, and when she asked me to make stops or drop her off somewhere different, it made everything worse. She got this look on her face like I'd just told her I was canceling Christmas. She said she didn't think it was that big a deal and that I was being kinda cold about this. She thought this was supposed to be a favor between friends. I explained that it was a favor, but favors work both ways. I told her I'd been going out of my way to help her, and she'd been treating it like I was her personal driver service. She said that wasn't fair. I told her what wasn't fair was me getting in trouble at work because she couldn't manage her time. I said I liked her and didn't want us to fall out over something like this, but I needed to look out for myself. She went quiet for the rest of the drive. When we got to work, she got out of the car without saying thank you or goodbye, just slammed the door and walked away. Since then, she's been giving me the cold shoulder at work. She won't make eye contact when we pass in the hallway, and she's been sitting at a different table during lunch. A mutual friend from accounting pulled me aside yesterday and told me that she'd been complaining about how I had ditched her, was being really unfair about the whole situation. The friend said she felt like I had abandoned her over something small and was pretty upset about it. I explained that it wasn't small because we both got written up since she couldn't be ready on time. The friend mentioned that she said I was being dramatic about a few minutes here and there. I pointed out that those few minutes got us both in trouble with our supervisors. Even after everything, she still didn't get it. She was acting like I was the bad guy for not wanting to risk my job anymore. The final straw came this morning. I was walking to my car in the parking lot when she approached me. I thought maybe she was going to apologize, or at least try to have a reasonable conversation about the whole thing. Instead, she asked if I was just going to leave her stranded with no way to get to work. I pointed out that she managed to get here today, didn't she? She said she had to call a rideshare and asked if I knew how much that cost. I told her that wasn't my problem anymore. She said I was being really selfish and she couldn't believe I'd do this to a friend over something so stupid. That's when I lost it a little bit. I told her she was calling me selfish when I had driven her to work for 3 months, waited outside her place almost every morning while she took her time getting ready, made detours so she could get coffee and breakfast and whatever else she needed, and got written up at work because of her schedule. I asked how that made me selfish. She insisted it wasn't that big of a deal. I reminded her it was a big enough deal that we both got in trouble with our bosses twice. She said I was supposed to help my friends out. I agreed that helping friends was important, but explained that she wasn't treating this like a friend helping out. She was treating me like her personal driver, and the difference was that drivers get paid. She stood there for a moment looking like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Finally, she said fine, she didn't need me anyway and would figure something else out. I told her good. I was sure she would. She walked off toward the building and I got in my car feeling relieved for the first time in weeks. It's been 3 days since that conversation, and she's still giving me dirty looks at work. But you know what? I don't care anymore. I'm getting to work on time, I'm not stressed about being late, and I'm not spending extra money on gas for detours I never agreed to make. Some people just don't understand that doing someone a favor doesn't mean you become their personal service. I was happy to help out a friend, but she turned it into something else entirely. And the fact that she still thinks I'm the one who was wrong just proves that I made the right decision. I worked night shifts as a nurse at the local hospital, and today was brutal. We had 3 emergency admissions back to back, and I didn't get to take a proper break for 12 hours straight. My feet were killing me, I had a splitting headache, and all I wanted was to grab some groceries and get home to collapse on my couch. I live alone and work these crazy hours, so grocery shopping is always a challenge. I usually end up going right after my shift ends at 7 in the morning when most normal people are just starting their day. The store is usually pretty quiet then, which is perfect for someone like me who just wants to get in and out without any drama. I had a decent sized cart full of stuff because I hadn't been shopping in 2 weeks. Nothing fancy, just the basics: milk, bread, some frozen dinners for those nights when I'm too tired to cook, coffee, and some fruits and vegetables that would probably go bad before I remembered to eat them. You know, typical single-person groceries. The checkout lines were mostly empty except for one lane that had a shorter wait. I got behind an elderly man who was slowly unloading his cart, and I didn't mind waiting. After standing on my feet all night, I was just grateful to be almost done with errands. That's when she showed up. This woman walked up behind me with a small hand basket. She looked to be in her 40s, perfectly put together despite the early hour, with that hairstyle that screams, "I want to speak to your manager." She immediately started making these dramatic sighing noises and tapping her foot like she was performing in a theater. After about 30 seconds of her theatrical display, she tapped me on the shoulder. She told me that she only had a few items and was in a hurry, so I could wait while she went first. I turned around thinking maybe I misheard her. I asked her what she had said. She repeated that she only had a few items and was in a hurry, then pointed out that I had a whole cart full of stuff. She said it only made sense for her to go first. I looked at her basket. She had maybe 5 or 6 items total. Then I looked at my cart, which was pretty full. I told her that I understood she was in a hurry, but I was here first, and the line worked on a first-come, first-served basis. She said that was ridiculous and claimed she would be done in 2 minutes while I was going to take forever with all my stuff. Her voice was getting louder, and I could feel other people starting to look in our direction. The elderly man in front of me had finished unloading and was now watching our interaction with raised eyebrows. I said no, that I was here first and staying in line. That's when she really started her performance. She let out this huge, exaggerated huff and began complaining loud enough for everyone to hear about how unbelievable this was and how some people were so inconsiderate. She claimed she had important things to do today. She kept this up the entire time the elderly man was checking out. Every few seconds, she'd sigh dramatically or make some comment about how long everything was taking. She checked her phone repeatedly and made a big show of looking at her watch, complaining that this was taking forever and that some people needed to learn basic courtesy. I ignored her completely, which seemed to make her even more frustrated. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through it, trying to tune out her constant commentary about how unreasonable I was being. The elderly man finished up and wished me a good day when he left. I started unloading my cart onto the conveyor belt, and the cashier, a young guy who looked like he was probably in college, began scanning my items. The cashier asked how my morning was going. I told him it was better now that I was almost done with errands, and mentioned I'd had a long night at work. He said he understood because he was pulling doubles that week too. We made small talk while he scanned my groceries. He was efficient and friendly, and despite my full cart, we were moving along at a pretty good pace. The whole time, the woman behind me continued her huffing and complaining about how this was ridiculous and that she could have been done 20 minutes ago. The cashier finished scanning everything and gave me my total. I pulled out my credit card and was about to insert it into the reader when the woman behind me completely lost it. She shouted for us to wait and stop everything right now. The cashier and I both turned to look at her. She demanded that the cashier cancel my transaction immediately so she could go first. She said this was completely unfair, and she refused to wait any longer. The cashier looked at her like she had grown a second head. He explained that he couldn't cancel a completed transaction because the items were already bagged and I was ready to pay. She told him to unbag everything then, claiming this was customer service and the customer was always right. She said she was telling him this was wrong. I pointed out that I was also a customer and I was here first. She yelled that I was being completely unreasonable and that she had somewhere important to be. The cashier looked between us, and I could see he was trying not to smile. He told her that he understood she was in a hurry, but he couldn't ask customers who were here first to give up their place in line because that wasn't how it worked. She screamed that this was outrageous and that we were both being completely disrespectful to her. That's when the cashier actually started laughing. Not maliciously, but like he found the whole situation ridiculous. He said that asking someone to cancel their completed transaction so she could cut in line wasn't really how grocery stores worked. I handed him my credit card and completed my payment while she continued ranting behind us. She got louder and more dramatic with each sentence, declaring she was never shopping there again and that this was the worst customer service she'd ever experienced. She yelled that we had no idea how to treat customers. Other customers in nearby lines were starting to stare and whispered to each other. The cashier told me to have a great day and thanked me for shopping with them. He handed me my receipt with a knowing smile. I thanked him and told him to have a good day too, wishing him luck with the rest of his shift. When I grabbed my bags and started to leave, I heard the woman step up to get checked out. She was still complaining to the cashier about how I had been completely rude to her and should have let her go first out of common courtesy. The cashier politely said he would get her checked out as quickly as possible. I was almost to the exit when I heard her voice one more time, threatening to report both of us to corporate and calling our behavior unacceptable. I walked out to my car shaking my head. When I was loading my groceries into my car, I saw her storm out of the store still complaining to herself about disrespectful people and poor customer service. She got into a luxury car parked in a handicapped spot without any visible disability placard or license plate. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.